The cemetery was quieter than usual that Thursday afternoon. November rain had swept through earlier, leaving the grass slick and the headstones glistening like polished river stones. I came every week, always on Thursdays, always at 3 o'clock. It had been my ritual for the past 2 years, ever since we laid Emma to rest beneath the old oak tree she used to climb as a child. I parked my car in the usual spot and gathered the fresh daisies I'd brought. Her favorite flowers, the ones she used to pick in the fields behind our house when she was little. The walk to her grave was one I could make with my eyes closed now, past the Henderson Mausoleum, around the bend where the Korean War veterans were buried, and up the gentle slope where the newer graves stretched out like a patchwork quilt of grief. But as I approached Emma's headstone, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. Someone was already there. A man was kneeling in front of her grave, his shoulders shaking with what could only be sobs. He wore the navy blue uniform of the cemetery maintenance staff, and his weathered hands clutched a single white rose. My first instinct was anger. This was my time, my moment with my daughter. Who was this stranger intruding on my private grief? But as I drew closer, something about the raw desperation in his crying stopped me from speaking. This wasn't casual sadness. This was the kind of grief that came from somewhere deep and personal. I stood there perhaps 10 feet away, uncertain of what to do. The man hadn't noticed me. He was speaking to the headstone in a voice choked with emotion, words I couldn't quite make out. I should have announced myself, cleared my throat, something. Instead, I found myself frozen, watching this scene unfold. Finally, he seemed to sense my presence. He turned, and I saw his face fully for the first time. He was older than I'd initially thought, probably in his late 50s with graying hair and deep lines etched around his eyes. Those eyes were red and swollen, and when they met mine, I saw something flicker there. Recognition, perhaps, or fear. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, struggling to his feet and wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll go." "Wait," I heard myself say. "You knew Emma?" He froze, and for a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You're her father, Mr. Harrison. I've seen you here before. I'm Marcus. I'm the head groundskeeper here. You knew my daughter?" I repeated, my mind racing. Emma had never mentioned anyone named Marcus. She'd been a high school English teacher, bright and passionate about literature and her students. What connection could she possibly have had with a cemetery janitor? Marcus looked down at the white rose still clutched in his hand. "I did," he said quietly. "Though I imagine you didn't know about me. Emma, she asked me to keep our friendship private." "Friendship?" The word came out sharper than I intended. He flinched slightly but held my gaze. "Could we talk? Maybe sit down? There's a bench just over there under the willow. I think there are some things you should know about your daughter, things that might bring you comfort." Every instinct told me to be wary. This stranger was claiming some secret relationship with Emma, my brilliant, beautiful daughter who had been taken from us by a drunk driver on a rainy night 2 years ago. She'd been 29 years old, with her whole life ahead of her, and now this man was suggesting he knew something about her that I didn't. But there was something in his eyes, in the genuine grief I'd witnessed, that made me nod. We walked to the bench in silence, and once we sat down, Marcus began to speak. "I met Emma 3 years ago," he began, his voice steadier now. "I was working here, same as always, maintaining the grounds. It was a Tuesday morning in April, and I was pruning the roses near the chapel when I saw this young woman walking through the cemetery. She wasn't dressed for a funeral, and she wasn't heading to any particular grave. She was just wandering." He paused, and I could see him traveling back to that memory. "I watched her for a while. I'm protective of this place, you understand, and sometimes people come here who shouldn't. But she was different. She was looking at everything with this intensity, stopping to read the headstones, taking photographs with her phone. Finally, I approached her and asked if I could help her find someone." Marcus smiled faintly at the memory. "She laughed and said she wasn't looking for anyone in particular. She was a teacher, she told me, and she was working on a project with her students about local history. She wanted to collect stories from the cemetery, to help her students understand that history wasn't just dates in a textbook. It was real people, with real lives." I felt my chest tighten. That sounded exactly like Emma. She was always trying to make her lessons come alive for her students, to help them see the human element in everything they studied. We started talking, Marcus continued, and I found myself telling her about this place, about the people buried here. I've worked here for 32 years, Mr. Harrison. I know almost every grave, every story. And Emma, she listened like every word mattered. She came back the next week and the week after that. It became a regular thing. She'd come on Tuesday mornings before school started, and we'd walk through the cemetery together. I'd tell her about the Civil War soldier buried on the North Hill, about the little girl who died of influenza in 1918, and whose mother planted violets on her grave every spring until she passed away herself. But why didn't she tell us? I interrupted, my voice rough with emotion. Why keep it secret? Marcus looked at me carefully. Because she knew how it would look. A young teacher spending time with an older maintenance worker in a cemetery? She worried people would misunderstand. And more than that, she told me that her family, especially you, had certain expectations for her, about who she should spend time with, what her social circle should look like. The words hit me like a physical blow because I knew, immediately, that they were true. Claire and I had always encouraged Emma to network with other professionals, to attend the right social events, to maintain appearances. It hadn't been malicious. We genuinely believed we were helping her build a successful life. But had we been so rigid that our daughter felt she couldn't tell us about a friend who didn't fit our narrow definition of appropriate? She valued you, I said softly, to keep coming back like that. And I valued her, Marcus replied, his voice thick again. Mr. Harrison, your daughter saved my life. I looked at him sharply. What do you mean? He took a deep breath. 4 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer. Margaret was everything to me. We'd been married for 35 years, and when she died, I lost my way completely. I kept working because I didn't know what else to do, but I was going through the motions. I was thinking dark thoughts about joining Margaret. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. And then Emma came along. At first, our conversations were just about the cemetery, about history, but gradually we started talking about other things. She told me about her students, about the books she loved, about her dreams of maybe writing a novel someday. And I started telling her about Margaret, about our life together, about the grief that was eating me alive. Marcus turned to face me fully. Your daughter didn't just listen, Mr. Harrison. She understood. She'd lost her grandmother the year before. Your mother, I believe. And she knew what that grief felt like. But more than that, she made me see that my life still had value. That the work I did here mattered, that the stories I carried mattered. She helped me remember that Margaret wouldn't want me to give up. Tears were streaming down my face now. I'd known Emma had been close to my mother, had taken her death hard, but she'd seemed to bounce back so quickly. Had she been struggling more than she'd let on? Had we been so busy with our own lives that we'd missed the signs? We became real friends, Marcus went on. I know how that might sound to you, but it's the truth. Age didn't matter. Background didn't matter. We connected because we both understood loss, and because we both loved stories. She brought me books from her classroom library. I taught her about horticulture. Did you know she started a garden at her apartment? She sent me pictures of her tomatoes. I shook my head, newly overwhelmed by all these details about my daughter's life that I'd never known. Emma had lived in an apartment across town, and we'd visited sometimes, but I'd never noticed a garden. What else had I missed? She talked about you, you know, Marcus said gently. About both her parents. She loved you very much, but she also felt pressured to be perfect, to live up to your expectations. She worried that if she told you about me, about our friendship, you'd think she was wasting her time or associating with the wrong kind of people. She was afraid of disappointing you. The guilt crashed over me in waves. We never met. I never wanted her to feel that way. I know, Marcus said, and I think deep down she knew that too. She understood that your expectations came from love, but it still kept her from being completely open with you. We sat in silence for a while, watching the wind rustle through the trees. A crow landed on a nearby headstone, cawed once, and flew away. The last time I saw her, Marcus said quietly, was the day before she died. She came by on a Monday, which was unusual. She normally came on Tuesdays. She seemed excited about something. She told me she'd decided to write that novel she'd always talked about. She said she was going to start making time for the things that really mattered to her, that life was too short to keep postponing her dreams. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a worn photograph. It showed Emma and Marcus standing together in the cemetery. both smiling widely. Emma had her arm around his shoulders and they looked genuinely happy. She brought her camera that day and asked one of the other workers to take this picture. She said she wanted to remember that moment, the moment she decided to start living more authentically. I took the photograph with shaking hands, staring at my daughter's radiant smile. "Can I keep this?" "I was hoping you would," Marcus said. "I have another copy at home." "Mr. Harrison, I've been coming to Emma's grave every week since the funeral. I've seen you here and I've always left before you arrived because I wasn't sure. I didn't know if you knew about me or if I had any right to grieve here." "You had every right," I said firmly. "You were her friend. A real friend, it sounds like." "She was my friend too," Marcus said. "One of the best I ever had. She gave me a reason to keep going when I couldn't find one myself. I owe her everything." We talked for another hour, sitting on that bench as the afternoon light began to fade. Marcus told me more stories about Emma, about the time she brought her entire class to the cemetery for a field trip, and how excited she'd been to share all the history she'd learned, about the poetry she'd introduced him to, including Mary Oliver and Pablo Neruda, about the day she'd helped him plant a memorial rose garden in an unused corner of the cemetery, and how she'd insisted on getting dirt under her fingernails right alongside him. With each story, I felt like I was discovering a new dimension of my daughter, parts of her that she'd kept hidden from me, not out of malice but out of fear that I wouldn't understand or approve. And the terrible truth was that she'd probably been right. If Emma had told me 3 years ago that she was spending her free time with a cemetery groundskeeper, would I have understood? Or would I have questioned her choices, suggested she network with people who could help her career? "I wish I'd known," I said finally. "I wish she'd felt like she could tell me." "I wish that too," Marcus admitted. "But Mr. Harrison, you should also know that Emma spoke about you with such love and respect. She admired you tremendously. She told me about how you'd worked your way up from nothing, how you'd built your business from the ground up to give your family a better life. She was proud to be your daughter. I was proud to be her father." I whispered. "I am proud to be her father." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, Marcus and I walked back to Emma's grave together. He placed his white rose on the headstone, and I laid down my daisies next to it. "Would you like to come again next week?" I found myself asking. "Maybe we could come together sometimes, share our memories of her." Marcus's face brightened with surprise and gratitude. "I'd like that very much." Over the following months, Marcus and I developed our own friendship, built on the foundation of our shared love for Emma. He introduced me to the cemetery's history that had so fascinated my daughter, and I began to see the place not just as where Emma was buried, but as a repository of stories and lives that mattered. Marcus taught me the names of the flowers growing on various graves and told me the stories behind them. I also started making changes in my own life. I reached out to Emma's former students and established a scholarship in her name for those who wanted to pursue teaching. I read the books Marcus told me she'd loved, trying to see the world through her eyes, and I started keeping a journal, writing down memories of Emma before they faded, trying to capture the essence of who she really was. Not who I'd expected her to be, but who she'd actually been. One day, about 6 months after that first encounter, Marcus brought me something. It was a small notebook with a worn cover. "Emma left this in my workshop," he said. "I found it a few weeks after the accident. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, but I think now is the right time." I opened it carefully. Inside were pages of Emma's handwriting, notes for the novel she'd wanted to write, character sketches, snippets of dialogue, but there were also personal reflections, thoughts about life and death, friendship and family. On one page, she'd written, "I'm learning that the most meaningful connections often come from the most unexpected places. Marcus has taught me that wisdom has nothing to do with degrees or social status, and everything to do with how deeply you've lived and loved. I hope someday I can be brave enough to stop hiding the parts of my life that don't fit the expected narrative." I closed the notebook and looked at Marcus through tears. "Thank you for being her friend, for seeing her for who she really was." "Thank you," he replied, "for letting me continue to be part of her story." Now, when I visit Emma's grave every Thursday, I often find Marcus has been there earlier in the week leaving his white rose. Sometimes we coordinate our visits and spend time together, talking about Emma or simply sitting in companionable silence. He's shown me that grief doesn't have to be a solitary journey. and that sometimes the people who understand us best are the ones we'd never expect. I learned something profound from discovering Marcus crying at my daughter's tomb. I learned that Emma had lived a richer, more complex life than I'd known. I learned that my expectations, however well-intentioned, had created barriers between us. And I learned that love and friendship can cross any boundary we construct, of age, class, or circumstance, if we're brave enough to let them. Emma's friendship with Marcus was a gift to both of them. And now, in a way, it's become a gift to me too. It's taught me to look beyond surface appearances, to value people for who they are rather than what they can offer, and to honor the connections that bring meaning to our lives, even if they don't fit neatly into the boxes we've created. Sometimes I think about that last conversation Emma had with Marcus about her decision to live more authentically, to pursue her dreams. Though her life was cut tragically short, I find comfort in knowing that she'd made that choice, that she was moving toward being more fully herself. And I'm grateful that in her final days, she had a friend who saw and appreciated all of her, not just the parts she thought the world wanted to see. The truth about their love, the pure, uncomplicated friendship between a young teacher and an older groundskeeper, has changed me. It's made me a better person, a more open one. And while I would give anything to have Emma back, to tell her that she never had to hide any part of herself from me, I'm grateful for what Marcus has given me, a fuller picture of my remarkable daughter, and a new understanding of what truly matters in this brief, precious life we're given.